Hello and welcome to DIY EV Chat. My name's Tom Cheesewright, and in this series I interview people who've been crazy enough to build their own electric cars and occasionally those people who help us to do so. In this episode, I'm joined by Ben Bament. Welcome to the podcast, Ben.
Hello.
Now, as you'll notice, we've got a little bit of latency on the line. I'll maybe take some of that out in the edit, but some of it will probably stay in. I'll start with my first question that I ask everybody, Ben. What's the day job? What do you do that may have given you the skills to tackle your own electric car?
So it's changed a bit over the years. When I started doing this electric stuff, I was selling books in the bookshop.
Okay.
Since then, we've gone a bit. So now I work for a company called Arconic, and they do resto mod defenders for the Americans. So I build engines for them 3 days a week.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's my day job now.
But when you started, did you have any sort of qualifications or degree that sort of set you in good stead to do something like this?
History at university was sort of useful, but apart from that, no, not really. I just sort of picked it up as I went along. All the information's on the internet, and you can work it out from there.
Which is great, but there aren't many people who are sort of brave enough to launch into this without a background in at least one of the holy triumvirate of electronics, coding, or sort of mechanical engineering. So it's there's some bravery there, and interesting that you've sort of parlayed that experience into a professional career now.
Almost, yeah. So I did have a past interest in mechanics anyway, and that sort of turned into enough of a skills to get the job that I have now, and then they trained me up from there. And that's
fantastic. And so that past interest in mechanics, have you done any sort of similar projects? Have you built stuff along these lines, or petrol powered, something like that?
Not really, to be fair, no. I went straight into electric stuff. So the first one I did was the quad bike, which is behind me. There you can see it. It's right back there. And then I went straight from there to the MG, and now I'm on to the next project now. Nothing before that. It was nothing physical anyway.
So we'll get to those projects. Where did you sort of stumble across this? Like, what was the inspiration, or what was the moment when you thought, I could do this?
I don't think there was really a moment of inspiration. It was just arrogance of being young and thinking I can do anything.
I miss those days.
Yeah. Reality's hitting now, but I've got far enough that I can get a little bit further than I originally thought I could.
So how old were you when you started on the quad?
To be fair, what was that? That would have been late 20s, or I would have been 28 or so, I think then. I was still reasonably young, I guess.
Yeah. And what was the driver for that project? Was that you wanted one, you needed one, or was it sort of there's a mountain I should climb it?
So we were talking about electric cars back then, and I thought, well, there's no way I can afford one, but I might be able to build one. But I don't want to build one straight away with all that. I couldn't afford to build one straight away. So I thought, well, I'll start with something smaller, like a quad bike. We got my partner's farm, which is where I have the unit. He has use for a quad bike, so that's where we started from. Is the smallest item. So if you make mistakes at 72 volts, it's not as bad as making mistakes at 300 volts. So that was my thinking.
So that was a DC project, was it?
It's still brushless DC motor, but it's just much lower voltage than the one we're using in the cars.
Yeah. And I guess that sort of explains the sort of quad bike. You then moved on to a full size car at some point. How much later was that?
So the quad bike took me 2 years, and I started the car 2 years ago. I bought the car a year before that on eBay, kind of by accident, because it didn't make very much on the auction, and so I had it. And
they're drastically underpriced sometimes. Those.
Yeah, I bought that for £190, and it cost me £190 on top of that to bring it back home. So it was quite cheap.
So, for those who don't know, what is it? What was the car you bought?
It is an MGF.
And any particular attachment to those historically? What made you want to choose one of those, or was it just that ridiculous price?
Almost. Well, I've got a bit of an attachment for like old British makes. So other cars I have are Rovers, Land Rovers. The tractors are British, a Leyland. So I just like that old sort of naff British manufacturers. And at the time, the MGF was the only one I could afford. So all the MGBs and that were way too expensive.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of the MGF actually. I got to drive one back from a wedding a few years ago after the person I'd gone with was too hungover to drive, so I drove us back in her car, and I have to say, very much enjoyed it. I've sort of kept half an eye on them ever since.
Yeah, when they're running right, they're quite nice.
And so you bought it with the intention of doing a conversion, did you?
Yeah, that was the idea. At the time, I didn't have the money or ability to do it, so I changed the head gasket on it. That was the reason it was cheap. Ran it for another month or so, and then the clutch started slipping, and I thought, well, the subframe's got to come out now anyway, so I might as well do the whole thing.
A K series with head gasket issues. Whoever would have thought?
Yeah, it's quite rare.
I think they've all mostly been done now, so it's a bit of a misnomer,
so,
but they certainly were an issue in the past, weren't they? And so you got your MGF. What was the sort of the next thing you bought? How did you decide what to sort of put in there?
Yeah, so I was sort of looking around. That's when I was on the open inverter forums a bit before that anyway. That's when we started, the Outlander motors started coming up then. They were reasonably cheap. So yeah, that's where I bought that, put that in. And then we were looking at the Prius Gen 2 inverters. That was the original inverter I was going to have in that. Again, that was cheap. So it was all based on what's the cheapest things I can buy. And that's where.
They have made a big difference to sort of the entry point cost, haven't they? The Outlander parts, because they are significantly cheaper than going down the Leaf route. Certainly an awful lot cheaper than going down the Tesla route.
Oh yeah. And they're also, now all the CAN bus has been hacked. It's so easy, it's just all plug and play almost. Yeah, they're great.
So that suggests are you still using the Prius inverter, or have you shifted over to the matched inverter it's the rear motor you're using, isn't it, from the Outlander?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. No, I switched over from the Prius inverter. So I had it driving a few months back, but I just couldn't get the power out of the Gen 2, and I don't really enjoy that sort of problem solving of trying to develop stuff that isn't really going to fit together. So I sort of just scrapped that. I went to the Outlander inverter, which ended up being cheaper than the Prius inverter in the end. But that's just 2 years later. Everything's much cheaper now.
Yeah, there are a lot of those parts around, and there are breakers specialising in the Outlanders now. So if you know who to call, it's quite easy to get hold of those bits. And all the other bits as well, because we can now CAN bus control the heaters and everything else.
Yeah, it's great now. And even seeing electric car batteries, the high voltage packs are dropping really quickly now as well. So.
Yeah, I saw someone bought a Kia e-Niro 50 kilowatt hour pack for £1,500 yesterday, I think.
Yeah, I'm quite jealous of that
one. What batteries have you got in yours?
So I've got some, they're Cochrane pouch cells. So they're just bare pouch cells that I've sort of packaged up together and put in the passenger seat, or the space where the passenger seat used to be. They're not ideal, but they were pretty good value, and I think the performance is quite good for them.
So it's effectively a single-seater race car now.
It is, yeah. Thanks to the DVLA.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. What was the driving sort of factor for using the passenger footwell for the batteries, or the passenger side for batteries?
So originally it was going to be in the front. In the MGF, the front's all bare, and there's a spare seat, so I was going to cut that, or a spare tyre compartment. So I was going to cut that compartment. There's a subframe there from a Rover Metro, so it's strong enough to hold the weight. And I was going to put batteries in there. And then the DVLA started getting really funny. So I thought, well, I can't do that, so I'm just going to have to use any existing bolt holes. And the only space in the car that had the space and the existing bolt holes to support that weight was the front passenger seat. So that went.
It is a bizarre situation at the moment with those restrictions. It's really limiting, and I understand. I would understand the desire to ensure that conversions on the road are safe and to have some sort of level of inspection of the quality of work. But it just seems so absolutely arbitrary to say that you can't modify it in any way.
Yeah, it just seems that. I think it's almost having the opposite effect of driving things on the ground. So people just don't bother to tell the DVLA now. So effect, they've kind of had less influence than they would have before because they're just not getting told about it now.
Yeah, and I know some people that are absolutely not keen to come on here and talk about their project, and aren't documenting their projects for precisely that reason. It's a bit tricky for me, having been documenting the process all the way through. But yeah, just fingers crossed, I don't have to ever sort of turn the camera off at any point and hide some bits of my project. So, where did you do the work? I take it you were looking at where you are now. Was it in a sort of farm building?
Yeah, so my partner's family have a farm up here in Somerset. So yeah, I just had a bit of barn space and started from there. And now I've moved into a slightly nicer unit to do the quad bikes and that. And now I've got a bit more space next door again to do the tractor now. So yeah, it's all nice farm buildings, all covered up and a bit of light, which is nice.
Yeah, well, it's just nice to have the space under cover. I think a lot of people would be very, very jealous indeed. So where's the MGF? Before we talk about the other projects, where's the MGF up to now? Is it road legal?
Yep, so I've been driving that for 2 months, possibly. Yeah, I insured it back in June, assuming that it'll be done very imminently. And then there's another 3 months after that, it was actually MOT'd. So yeah, I'm just driving around now, charging at work, which is great, and getting some free weekend driving. So.
And no problems getting it sort of MOT'd?
No. I've been talking to the MOT guy for the last 2 years anyway, so he was expecting it. So. Yeah, it's all right.
And insurance, what was that like? I guess it's not too bad around where you are.
Not really. I used Adrian Flux. I think a lot of people in the UK are using them. They do a lot of modded cars anyway, so it was a bit more expensive than not electric, but it wasn't terrible. So.
Yeah, I think it's so dependent on postcode. And as I've started pointing out to people, there is now an alternative to Adrian Flux. There wasn't until recently another insurer that would do DIY EVs, but Lancaster Insurance will now. If anybody's struggling with insurance or wants to get a competitive quote, contact me through the comments or anywhere else, and I'll put you in touch with the right people at Lancaster Insurance. Adrian Flux is very good, no criticism, but I do think it's important to have some competition in the market. What were the biggest challenges in the project, in the MG project?
Probably
apart from maybe the DVLA.
yeah, apart from bureaucracy, probably the batteries. Because they were just like bare pouch cells, I had to research all the compression and make it a lot harder to make up the battery box. And there's no BMS system to talk about, so I had to I used Tesla BMS slave boards with Synth BMS just on a bare teensy board. That was the hardest thing, I think. That took me the longest time. Yeah,
and I think the complexities of battery management and ensuring you're not ruining probably the biggest investment in any project, I think concerns a lot of people, quite apart from the high voltageness, but actually looking after that investment is sometimes quite tricky.
Yeah, it's still things that I'm working on now. Like the BMS is still something I've got to work on just to get fine-tuned. But there's a bit of a rush in the end, but it works, so that's the main thing.
Are you doing any sort of heating and cooling of those batteries?
No, they're just all they're in the cabin, I guess, so that makes them slightly less exposed to the elements. But there's no heating or cooling. The power draw isn't amazing on it anyway, so I'm not really pushing those cells, and I'm not charging very fast either. So yeah, it's not really high performance, so it should be fine.
And what's been the most rewarding aspect of it? What's really sort of put a smile on your face?
Probably that first drive. It's always the first drive, I think. It's the same with the quad bike as well. Like the first time you spin the wheels and the first time you move, yeah, it's great. That's always the best bit. And you're getting good performance now out of the. What are you using to drive the Outlander inverter? What control board are you using? So it's my own board I made up from a teensy 3.6, and I designed a PCB to mount it on. And then that takes the analog signal from the throttle position sensor from the original engine. I kept that, and then that gives me a 0 to 100 throttle, and then that turns into CAN bus signals. But yeah, it's pretty good. I spun the wheels in second gear today coming out of junction, but I think that's more road conditions than power. So.
But there's plenty to give it a bit of go, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So, and you put it in first gear, and it's a bit silly then. So.
Given that you started this with some sort of real budget constraints, do you have an idea of what you've spent, if you're comfortable sharing that?
Yeah, it depends if you ask the accountant or my girlfriend, to be fair. So, but yeah, the project as a whole has cost about £8,000, and then what's in the car has cost maybe four. So I bought a lot more batteries than I needed, and I sold them on. So yeah, like it hasn't cost me £8,000 when I minus the income from some of the spare bits. But yeah, inside the car is about 4,500 maybe.
I guess, yeah, given I guess your battery is probably a good chunk of that. We know that the motor and inverter aren't too expensive. There's a lot of sort of cabling and getting circuit boards made and stuff like that.
Yeah, like it's surprising what little things mount up. Like contactors can be like £50-60 each, and then getting a good length of like high gauge cable or low gauge cable, thick cables. That's always expensive, even more so now. So all the little things add up, I found, rather than just a big inverter.
Yeah, I've got that to worry about. I'm adding my second pack soon, and I really need to go get some cable ordered. But thankfully it's only DC, so I can probably get away with unshielded.
Yeah, as well.
What's been your favourite tool on that project?
Oh, I was thinking about that actually, because I remember you've asked that a few times before. I think the copper hammer is probably my favourite tool. I use it all the time. It's when you need a hammer.
Oh, really?
That needs to be a bit more civil. So you usually use a copper hammer, and it won't damage anything so much. So.
That's a good tip, actually. I think I probably should invest in one of those, because I'm quite uncivilized with my use of hammers.
Yeah, I don't think I have it near me, but yeah, the copper hammers are great. I use them all the time.
That's a good tip. So you mentioned another project. You've got another project on the go. Did I see he say you're building an electric tractor?
Yeah, so that's the next one. That was probably what I wanted to do right from the start, to be fair. But yeah, it's an electric tractor. So it's an old 1970s Leyland 255. So again, it's this whole British Leyland, like naff British manufacturing again. But yeah, I picked that up earlier this year. Stripping it down at the moment and putting a Nissan Leaf motor into that.
Wow, nice and torquey. And battery wise,
not sure yet. So I'm the mistake I made with the MG is I bought the batteries really early on, and then they sat on the shelf for a year or so. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to put the motor in first, get all that working, maybe with like a really small high voltage battery, and then look for a proper battery and see what the prices are like then. But I'm thinking at the moment an e-Corsa battery. They look about the right in terms of having thermal plates and decent size and decent performance. I think we'll go with those, but we'll see what's available at the time.
and good price point on those as well.
Yeah, I've seen them go for pretty cheap. So hopefully in the next another 6 months it should be even lower. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I might have to reconsider my plans for my next project, actually, given the prices of some of these newer batteries that are coming out they're incredibly cheap. And so the tractor will be a workhorse, will it? Is that the plan? It'll be a working vehicle?
Yeah, so that's it's a workhorse and kind of an experiment. So like the big boys and the big manufacturers, they're making their electric tractors for the contractors and that. But the smaller farmer, the guys with like 50 to 200 acres or so, they're never going to be able to afford electric tractors anytime soon. Most of them are still using tractors that are 40 plus years old, or 20, 30 years old. So I wanted to convert a tractor and then get some real world data on working in the field, how much power does that consume, what batteries are we looking at to get an actual working tractor for small farms, and then we can tell in the future we need 100 kilowatt hours. Okay, that's fine. Once it hits that, then small tractors are feasible, I guess. But yeah, it's
I'm assuming are you bolting it up to the existing gearbox, the Leaf motor?
Yeah, existing motor. I'm probably going to have to keep the existing flywheel and the clutch as well, because on the tractors they have on some tractors they have a dual clutch, so it operates the PTO at the back as well as the traction for the vehicle. So,
I'm just thinking about tractors, like, because a lot of them the gearboxes are quite often sort of almost structural, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean the gearbox is the tractor. Like you can't get rid of a gearbox in a tractor because that's what it is. Everything else is built around it, especially the one.
No sort of direct drive, rear wheel drive options there, but an interesting project. I can just picturing now a Tesla tractor, but that's a flight of fancy I should not explore.
I am going to put in fast charging, so I really do want to go to a Tesla fast charge station and get a photo of that charging up one day.
That would be absolutely brilliant. And I guess it makes a lot of sense on a farm as well, because you've got loads of opportunity for solar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and especially with costs going up, input costs or agriculture are crazy as they are everywhere else. So if you can disconnect yourself from red diesel prices, that makes a huge amount of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, listen, Ben, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I hope maybe next time I'm down seeing family in Bridgewater, I might have to hop across and see if I can take a look at that MG, because it sounds like it'd be very good fun to drive.
Yeah, you're welcome to drop by any time.
Brill. Right, everyone, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Another really interesting DIY EV project. Lots more to come. I've got a load more interviews lined up. Please do like and subscribe if you want to see them, whether you're listening and you're subscribing on Spotify or Stitcher or wherever you're hearing this, or whether you're watching it on YouTube. Please do subscribe there. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.